Hey there, friend. Richard G's on the move again. Taking steps to clear the mind, leaving worries far behind, where every path feels like home, and you never walk alone. It's a welcome, open space, lit by kindness, filled with grace. Yeah, everybody get to know Jesus' name. Everybody gets to know Jesus' name.
Imagine you are trapped in a burning building.
Oh, man. Okay. Terrifying way to start, but I'm picturing it.
Right. It's a nightmare. The heat is unbearable, the smoke is just blinding, and your absolute, overwhelming, singular thought in that moment is, get me out of here.
Of course. That's the only logical thought you'd have.
Exactly. Now imagine that right in the middle of that panic, someone hands you a survival manual.
Like while the fire is actively burning.
Yes, right in the thick of it. And you rip it open, obviously expecting a map to the nearest exit. But instead, the manual says, do not ask for the fire to be put out, ask to become fireproof.
Wow. That's wild. It's a completely radical, almost entirely counterintuitive premise.
It really is. It goes against literally every biological survival instinct we possess as humans. And yet that is the exact framework we are dissecting for you today.
It's a complete inversion of how we're naturally wired to handle distress. Our brains, specifically the amygdala, are designed to identify a threat, sound the alarm, and demand the immediate removal of that threat.
Which makes sense, right? Like you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand away.
Yeah, exactly. We are biologically programmed to seek the quick fix. You feel pain, you pull away. You feel a headache, you take a pill. The fundamental goal of our nervous system is the total, instant eradication of friction.
Which is perfectly fine for a headache. But you, our listener, shared these notes with us because you are looking for a way to navigate the muddy waters of your own life.
The really deep, protracted trials where a quick fix just simply doesn't exist.
Yeah, you're tired of those empty platitudes that just don't work when things get genuinely, deeply hard. So today, we are unpacking this specific framework just for you. We're looking at this fascinating source text titled Praying Through the Trials, a script for spiritual endurance.
And specifically, we're diving deep into what the text calls Script 2, which I have to say is not just a collection of nice, comforting thoughts to read when you're feeling down.
No, definitely not.
What we are looking at here is a highly intentional psychological and spiritual architecture for survival. It's essentially a blueprint for radical acceptance and distress tolerance.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the foundational theme of this entire text is captured in one really definitive statement. It says, we do not pray away the problems, we pray through the problems.
That phrasing is so deliberate.
It is, and on the surface, it sounds like just a subtle shift in prepositions, like away versus through. But practically speaking, this demands a massive rewiring of how we perceive adversity.
Oh, absolutely. It is a tectonic shift in your default posture. To really understand the mechanics of how this works, we have to isolate the difference between demanding the instant removal of difficulty versus asking for companionship and growth during the trial.
Right, while the fire is actually happening.
Exactly. The text defines praying away as the demand that every difficulty be removed instantly. And as we just mentioned, this is our natural reflex.
It's a hot stove reflex.
Yeah. When we furiously try to wish a problem away or, manifest it away, we are acting on our most basic hardware. We're just screaming, I am in danger, make it stop.
But the text argues that this default setting is actually robbing us, doesn't it?
It does. When you shift to praying through, the source explicitly states that this approach yields 4 very specific provisions while the trial lasts. Not after it's over, in hindsight, but while you are in it.
And those 4 provisions are strength, wisdom, character, and presence. Let's dig into that, because that sounds like a lot to gain from something so painful.
Well, think about the cognitive mechanism here. If your only goal is the removal of the problem and the problem doesn't leave,
Which happens all the time in real life.
right, then you are entirely powerless. You've essentially failed. You become trapped in a state of victimhood because the one thing you wanted didn't happen.
You're just stuck in the burning building.
Exactly. But if your goal shifts to acquiring those four provisions, strength to endure the heavy load, wisdom to navigate the complexity of it, character that is forged by the friction, and a sense of presence, so you don't just succumb to isolation, you suddenly reclaimed your agency.
Oh, I love that. Reclaiming agency.
Yeah. The text suggests that by demanding the trial be shortened, we're essentially demanding that our own personal development be stunted.
I want to look at this through a slightly different lens. Let me try an analogy here. Praying away is kind of like showing up to the base camp of Mount Everest and demanding that a helicopter just drop you off at the summit.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Like, you want the view, you want the accomplishment, the glory, but you want absolutely zero of the brutal climb. But the problem is, if a helicopter actually did drop you at the summit without acclimatization.
The lack of oxygen and the sudden pressure change would literally kill you.
Exactly. You just aren't built for the summit yet. Your lungs can't handle it. Praying through, on the other hand, is standing at base camp and asking for a Sherpa, asking for the right oxygen tanks, and asking for the physical endurance to acclimatize to the altitude at every single camp along the way.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
You are still doing the grueling climb, but you are systematically adapting to the environment.
That is exactly the mechanism at play in the source text. You are asking for the internal resources to meet the external demand, rather than just asking the universe to magically cancel the demand entirely.
You're asking to be acclimatized to the pressure.
Yes.
Wait, hold on, though. Let me push back on this a little bit, because I want to make sure we aren't veering into toxic territory here.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
I get the Everest theory. It makes sense. But when you are actually on the mountain and you have frostbite and you literally can't breathe, isn't it okay to just want to be warm again?
Yep.
I mean, are we supposed to ignore our survival instinct entirely? Like, if I get a terrifying medical diagnosis or, I don't know, my bank account hits zero tomorrow, my immediate thought is not going to be, oh, excellent, a chance to acclimatize to suffering.
Right. Nobody thinks like that naturally.
My thought is going to be, please, somebody get me out of this. So is the text telling us that wanting relief is a sign of weakness?
No, not at all. And this is actually where the text shows immense psychological maturity. It does not advocate for masochism.
Okay, good. That's a relief.
Yeah, it completely validates the biological desire for relief. The text explicitly says, we still ask for relief when it's right. It doesn't ask you to pretend that a terrifying diagnosis is a fun little adventure. You are fully allowed to ask for the helicopter.
Man, that is a massive relief. Because honestly, trying to convince your nervous system that it shouldn't want to escape pain sounds like a recipe for a psychotic break.
It would be. It would be cognitive dissonance of the highest order. But what's fascinating here is the pivot.
The pivot.
Yet while you are allowed to ask for relief, the text introduces a crucial secondary clause that changes your default posture. The posture it advocates is, not my will, but yours.
Ah, okay.
And this is where the profound psychological shift happens. It frames this surrender not as a defeat, not as just letting the universe crush you, but as an admission of limited perspective.
It's admitting that my will is always going to be incredibly short-sighted, isn't it? Because my will is basically perfect health, endless money, zero conflict right now.
Precisely. Your will is driven by the amygdala.
Yeah.
By adopting the posture of not my will, you're essentially saying, my vantage point is restricted entirely to my immediate discomfort. I cannot see the long-term architecture of my own character.
Wow.
And when you release that white-knuckle grip on demanding the universe act as your personal customer service department, you create the cognitive and spiritual space for those four provisions to actually integrate into your psyche.
That makes a lot of sense. But you know, it's one thing to philosophize about acclimatizing to altitude when we're just sitting here comfortably in the studio.
Oh, for sure. The theory is the easy part.
Right. But what happens when the literal ground is falling out from under you? What happens when the stakes are your biological survival or your financial ruin?
Which is where this gets incredibly real.
Let's move into how this framework holds up against physical and material trials. Because the source material provides very specific scripts for these exact nightmares. Let's look at the health crisis first.
Let's do it.
So the script for a health crisis reads, Father, if it's possible, remove this. But even if not, let your grace be enough. Produce perseverance and hope while I walk through it.
Just look at the sequence of that script. It starts with the validation we just discussed. If it's possible, remove this.
It honors the human desire for a cure.
Exactly. But then it hits the absolute fulcrum of this entire philosophy. But even if not,
But even if not, uttering those 4 words when you are genuinely terrified for your life feels almost impossibly heavy. It really is the ultimate relinquishing of control.
it is an act of radical acceptance. And notice what it immediately asks for if the biological cure does not come. It asks, let your grace be enough.
And the text connects this concept of grace directly with an active process, right?
It does. It says, produce perseverance and hope. In the notes, it references 2 Corinthians 12.9 regarding grace being sufficient in weakness, and Romans 5.35, which lays out a very specific psychological progression.
What's that progression?
That suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope.
I really want to zero in on that verb, produce. The script literally treats the trial like a manufacturing plant.
Yes, that's exactly it.
It doesn't say, let me magically feel hopeful out of nowhere. It says, produce it.
Because hope isn't just a baseline emotion that you magically stumble into. It is an output. It completely strips the disease of its identity as just a random, meaningless tragedy and reassigns it a functional purpose.
It views the illness as a factory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The raw materials going into the factory are your physical pain, your uncertainty, and your fear. But the machinery of the trial, if you engage with it through this, even if not posture, processes those terrifying raw materials and actively manufactures a refined output.
So you aren't just passively enduring a sickness, waiting to see if you survive. You are actively participating in the manufacturing of your own resilience.
Beautifully said.
The sickness basically becomes resistance training for your spirit. It shifts the goalposts of success entirely. If success is only getting cured and you aren't cured, well, you are destroyed.
You're crushed.
Right. But if success is growing deeply and producing hope, you can actually achieve that regardless of what the MRI says.
That is the power of the through mindset.
But let's pivot to the other material trial the text tackles, job loss, economic crisis. The script for this one reads, God, I'm asking for provision, but more than that, teach me to trust you in the middle of this. Use this trial to mature me.
We see that exact same dual structure here again. It does not engage in spiritual bypassing at all.
It doesn't pretend the eviction notice isn't taped to your front door.
Exactly. It starts with, I'm asking for provision. It anchors itself firmly in the physical reality of the material world. But the real pivot relies on the phrase, but more than that.
But more than that, teach me to trust you. So it is actively ranking spiritual maturity higher than financial security. And honestly, I have to stop right here. I have to push back hard on this one.
I had a feeling you might.
Because if I literally cannot pay my rent tomorrow, I don't care about building character. I care about my kids eating.
Completely understandable.
How does this not just sound incredibly out of touch or even privileged to someone in the grip of real, crushing poverty? When your nervous system is in full fight-or-flight mode, how do you honestly prioritize a vague concept like maturity over a paycheck?
It is a completely fair challenge and a really important one. If the text simply said, hey, don't worry about the money, just focus on your spiritual growth, it would be deeply out of touch.
It would be an insult to human suffering.
It really would be. But that is exactly why the sequence is so vital. By explicitly starting with, I'm asking for provision, you are giving a voice to the very real physiological panic. You are laying the terror right out on the table.
Okay, so you aren't ignoring the rent check.
No. What the text is offering here is not a replacement for a paycheck, but a psychological survival strategy. It's something called a dual focus.
A dual focus. Walk me through the mechanics of that. How does that work when you're broke?
Well, if you are unemployed and you only focus on the empty bank account, your mind will be entirely consumed by a trauma response. Fear will literally paralyze your prefrontal cortex.
The logical part of your brain just shuts down.
Exactly. It will dictate your mood, it will fracture your relationships, and it will obliterate your self-worth because you will tie your entire identity to your lack of a job.
Right, you just spiral.
But by adding the second clause, but more than that, teach me to trust you, you are throwing a secondary cognitive anchor into the ground.
So you are giving your brain an alternative task to process.
Precisely. You are saying, I cannot control whether the recruiter calls me back today. That is entirely outside my sphere of influence. But I can control whether I practice trusting that my ultimate value as a human being is not dictated by my resume.
Wow.
It creates a parallel track of momentum. Your career might be completely stalled, but your internal development is still moving forward.
That is so practical. It prevents the external financial crisis from triggering a total internal collapse. It's basically a mechanism for maintaining your human dignity when the economy strips you of your resources.
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It keeps you from drowning in the feeling of uselessness. Now, health and money are terrifying, obviously, but they are ultimately impersonal forces.
Right. A disease doesn't hate you. An economy doesn't have a personal vendetta against you.
Exactly. But what happens when the uncontrollable factor is a person sitting right across from you at the dinner table?
Oh, the interpersonal stuff. This is where it gets really messy.
Yes. What happens when the trial involves someone whose will, whose actions, and whose words you absolutely cannot control? That brings us to Section 3, the interpersonal trials or relationship conflict.
This is often where our biological praying away reflex is the most violent, honestly. Because when another human being hurts us or opposes us, our immediate desire is for their total capitulation.
Oh, absolutely. We want to pray away their stubbornness. We basically want the universe to reach into their brain, instantly enlighten them to how wrong they are, and force them to apologize to us.
Please make them realize they're being entirely unreasonable.
Yes. That is the universal prayer of every argument ever. But the text takes a sharply different approach here. The script for relationship conflict reads, Lord, I want reconciliation, but while we're in this tension, give me your love and wisdom to respond like Jesus, not my will, but yours.
The linguistic choice that really anchors this script is the word tension. While we're in this tension.
It's a deeply uncomfortable word. It implies being stretched. It implies that the situation is unresolved, unstable, and actively vibrating with stress.
And crucially, the text does not promise a quick release of that tension. It doesn't provide magic words to make the other person suddenly agree with you. It explicitly acknowledges that you're going to be sitting in this uncomfortable, painful limbo for an undetermined amount of time.
The relationship is fractured, but you still have to interact with this person.
Exactly. This script is essentially a distress tolerance guide for the middle ground.
It makes me think of an analogy.
I'm ready for it.
Being in deep relationship tension is kind of like being stuck in a small rowboat with someone, and they are rowing in the exact opposite direction of you.
Oh, that's incredibly frustrating to picture.
Right. Your immediate instinct is to scream at them or to literally lunge across the boat and physically grab their oars out of their hands. You want to force them to row your way. But this script is basically telling you to stop reaching for their oars. It tells you to focus entirely on how you are sitting in the boat. Are you keeping your balance? Are you holding your own oars with grace, even while they are splashing water in your face?
That is the ultimate relinquishing of the illusion of control. You simply cannot steer their oars. And the script tells us exactly how to sit in the boat. Give me your love and wisdom to respond like Jesus.
Which is a very high bar to set.
It is.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand the psychological depth of this, the text points to a very specific historical and spiritual blueprint. It references Matthew 26.39, the account of Jesus in Gethsemane.
Right. And for context, for those listening, Gethsemane is the garden where Jesus is praying right before he is betrayed by one of his inner circle, arrested, and sent to execution.
It is the absolute peak of interpersonal betrayal and impending trauma.
Yes.
And in that moment, facing the ultimate injustice, his prayer is the exact embodiment of this entire framework. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will.
Wow.
To respond like this in the face of interpersonal conflict means undergoing a massive cognitive shift. It means completely surrendering the ego's demand for self-justification.
It means giving up the desperate need to prove you are right and they are wrong.
Which feels like dying, doesn't it?
It really does. The ego absolutely hates giving up the right to be vindicated.
It does. But by surrendering that need, you maintain your capacity to act with wisdom and love, even when the person across from you is actively trying to sink the rowboat. You prioritize your own spiritual integrity over winning the argument.
You are no longer reacting to their dysfunction. You are responding from your own grounded anchor.
Exactly.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Multiply that single rowboat by thousands or even millions, and you arrive at our next topic. If one person rowing the wrong way is exhausting, what happens when the person steering the ship is responsible for an entire organization or an entire country?
It scales up drastically.
It does. This brings us to Section 4, the burden of leadership and the concept of intercession.
Now, intercession simply means standing in the gap on behalf of someone else. And the source text places a massive spotlight on the psychological crushing weight that leaders carry. It lists political pressure, workplace stress, spiritual attack, and family responsibilities.
It's so easy to look at leaders, whether it's a CEO, a mayor, or even just the head of a local school board, and just view them as targets for our criticism.
Right, they just become caricatures to us.
Yeah. We evaluate their outputs, but we rarely consider the sheer internal toll of constantly making decisions that impact other people's lives.
Leadership is fundamentally an environment of perpetual friction. And our natural instinct when we actually care about a leader is to pray that their friction goes away. Like, make their critics be quiet, remove the obstacles, give them an easy win.
But the text explicitly advises against asking for the pressure to be removed. Instead, the instruction is to pray that they are sustained through the pressure.
Which brings us back to through instead of away.
Exactly. It provides 4 specific categories of leaders. Let's look at the first one, government leaders. And listen, before we read this, I want to be unequivocally clear for you listening at home.
Yes, very important caveat here.
We're looking at this strictly through the psychological framework provided by the text. Whether you voted for a politician or whether you actively campaign against them, we're remaining entirely impartial here. We are looking at the mechanics of sustaining a human being who is under the intense public pressure of governance.
Absolutely.
So the script says, Lord, sustain this leader through intense opposition. Direct their heart and let your power be made perfect in weakness.
Notice it does not say remove the opposition.
Right. It assumes opposition is a permanent structural reality of the job.
Because if you pray for a government leader to have absolutely zero opposition, you are essentially praying for a dictatorship. Friction is built right into the system.
Exactly. The prayer is for the sustenance of the human navigating that necessary friction. But honestly, the most profound part of this script is that final phrase. Let your power be made perfect in weakness.
It's a paradox that defines true leadership.
It really is. It suggests that a leader's greatest capacity does not come from an unbroken streak of arrogant victories, but from how they allow themselves to be guided when they hit the wall of their own human limitations.
Let's look at the workplace leader. The script says, Father, give my boss clarity and endurance as they walk through this pressure. Again, it deliberately avoids asking for a lighter workload.
Because a boss with a light workload isn't necessarily an effective leader. They might just be delegating all their responsibilities and avoiding the hard decisions.
Right. But a boss with clarity can see the strategic path even when the market is totally chaotic. And a boss with endurance won't burn out and turn toxic when the quarterly numbers drop.
You are praying for their internal capacity to expand to meet the environment rather than praying for the environment to shrink to accommodate their comfort.
That exact logic applies to the church leader category too. The text says, Lord, equip our pastors to stand firm and lead with joy rather than groaning.
I am fascinated by that phrase, joy rather than groaning. It is such a stark acknowledgement that spiritual leadership is so emotionally heavy that the default biological response is literally to just groan under the weight of other people's trauma.
The emotional toll of carrying the spiritual crises, the marriages falling apart, the grief of an entire community, it is immense. The prayer isn't that the community stops having crises, because that's impossible. People are messy.
Right.
The prayer is that the leader can access a baseline of supernatural joy while standing firm right in the middle of the pain. It is the ultimate test of distress tolerance, experiencing the heavy reality of the trial without being consumed by cynicism.
And the final category here is the home leader. The script reads, God, draw our family closer to you as we walk through these difficulties together. This one changes the dynamic slightly, doesn't it? It focuses on the communal nature of the trial.
It does. It acknowledges that when the head of a household is under pressure, the entire family system absorbs those shockwaves. Financial stress or health issues often fracture families. The pressure creates cracks.
But this prayer is a request for the difficulty itself to act as a binding agent.
Exactly. Instead of the stress driving them apart, the shared journey of walking through the difficulty forces them to rely on each other and draw closer to their foundation.
Okay, I need to pause here and ask a structural question about all 4 of these leadership categories.
Go for it.
Why does the text seem to actively protect the existence of the pressure? Objectively speaking, wouldn't a stress-free leader just be, well, better?
How so?
I mean, if my boss isn't stressed, they are probably more empathetic. If a politician isn't constantly battling opposition, they can actually execute their policies. Why are we strictly instructed not to pray the pressure away?
It's a brilliant question, and it really gets to the core mechanism of human ego. If we look closely at the psychology embedded in this text, It implies that removing the pressure might also destroy the very mechanism that keeps the leader grounded.
Oh, interesting.
We established earlier that the trial is a factory that produces character, right? Leaders require immense character because their decisions have massive blast radiuses. If you remove the pressure cooker, you stop the formation of that character.
So a stress-free leader is actually a dangerous leader.
Think about the phrase we talked about earlier, power made perfect in weakness. If a leader is completely stress-free, fully resourced, constantly praised, and facing absolutely no opposition, what happens?
They probably get a big head.
They begin to rely entirely on their own intellect, their own charisma, and their own ego. Hubris sets in. The pressure, the opposition, the moments where the leader is forced to admit, I do not know how to fix this, those moments of weakness are the exact cracks where a higher wisdom can enter.
Wow.
The pressure ensures the leader remains dependent on something greater than their own reflection in the mirror. It keeps them tethered to reality, which makes them profoundly safer for the people they are leading.
So you are praying that they don't lose the friction, because the friction is the only thing keeping their ego in check. That completely dismantles how we normally think about supporting the people in charge.
It flips it completely upside down.
But this leads us to a very dark, very real transition. We just talked about praying for leaders to endure their burdens. But what happens when that leader or a close friend or a family member is the very source of your deepest pain?
Yeah.
What happens when the person you are sharing the rowboat with actively takes an axe and chops a hole in the bottom of it?
That is the perfect way to describe betrayal.
This brings us to Section 5, which tackles the most complex, emotionally heavy, and ultimately liberating script in the entire text, the trial of unforgiveness.
The source material introduces a deeply personal, everyday example here. It moves beyond external circumstances like health or the economy and tackles the internal rot that occurs when we are profoundly betrayed. And it specifically notes the unique devastation of being hurt by someone you trusted, pointing out especially a leader or fellow believer.
Betrayal really is a unique kind of trauma. It's not just the action that hurts, it's the violation of the social contract. It shatters your entire understanding of reality.
It does.
And the natural human reflex, the ultimate praying away instinct, is to pray for retaliation. You want them to suffer exactly as much as they made you suffer. Or, at the very least, you pray for a kind of amnesia. You just want to excise them from your memory entirely.
Right. Just make me forget this ever happened.
Exactly. But the text provides a script for praying through the trauma of unforgiveness itself. Let's deconstruct the anatomy of this specific prayer because it is incredibly bounded.
It is a masterclass in psychological architecture. The text breaks down the mechanics of forgiveness into very specific, sequential steps. It does not rush the process at all.
Let's look at the first step.
The first step is an absolute requirement, acknowledging the wrong. The script begins, Lord, name hurt me deeply, and the pain is still real. I acknowledge the wrong. It does not make it right.
I have to stop at that phrase. It does not make it right. That is critical.
Why does that stand out to you?
Because it completely rejects toxic positivity. It rejects the pressure we often feel to just forgive and forget, or to pretend that the abuse wasn't actually that bad.
Exactly. The text establishes a firm boundary against enabling abuse or gaslighting yourself. Forgiveness is not a lobotomy. You are not required to lose your sense of objective morality.
Right.
You are allowed, and in fact instructed, to stand firmly in the truth that a boundary was violated, that a sin was committed, and that the pain is a valid, real entity in your nervous system. You must validate the wound before you attempt to clean it.
And once that reality is firmly established, the script moves to the second step, the choice. It says, but I choose to forgive them today as you have forgiven me.
Notice the specific phrasing there. I choose to forgive them today. It does not frame forgiveness as a sudden magical feeling of warmth that washes over you.
It's not a feeling at all.
No, it frames it as an active, daily act of the will. You might wake up tomorrow, remember the betrayal, feel the anger flare up in your chest all over again, and have to make that exact same choice again.
And the benchmark for making this choice isn't whether the person who hurt you has apologized or whether they deserve it. The benchmark is looking inward at how much grace you yourself have required from the divine.
It forcefully levels the playing field of human frailty.
Which leads to the third step, the actual release. The script says, set me free from the bondage of bitterness, heal my heart, and help me pray for them with clean hands.
The bondage of bitterness. That is a heavy Chris.
It is. We hear a lot of cliches about bitterness, like the old saying about drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Right, we've all heard that one.
But I think a more modern, accurate analogy is that holding on to unforgiveness is like leaving a malicious background app running on your phone.
Oh, that is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. I love that.
Think about it. The person who hurt you is completely unaffected. They are off living their life. But meanwhile, this malicious app of bitterness is running silently in the background of your brain 24/7,
Just eating up your battery.
draining your battery at twice the normal speed. It is taking up massive amounts of processing power. You have less patience for your kids, you have less focus for your job, because this app is constantly running the memory of the betrayal over and over again. You are physically tethered to the person who hurt you.
The text literally calls it the bondage of bitterness. You are chained to them. And practically speaking, the neurobiology totally supports this.
Oh, really? Tell me about the science of that.
Yet, ruminating on betrayal keeps your body flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. It literally shrinks your prefrontal cortex over time. So when the text asks for clean hands, it is framing forgiveness not as a gift you are wrapping up and handing to the offender. I mean, they might never even know you forgave them.
Right.
It frames forgiveness as a neurological reset. It is an act of personal spiritual hygiene. You are force quitting the malicious app so you can reclaim your processing power.
But how do you actually force quit it? If every fiber of my being is still angry, if the pain is still as real as the first step acknowledged, how do I let it go without feeling like they just got away with it?
That is the ultimate friction point. We hold on to the bitterness because we are terrified of injustice.
Yes, we feel like we have to act as the judge, jury, and executioner in our own minds. Like we have to constantly relitigate their crimes just to maintain some sense of moral equilibrium in the universe.
If we let it go, it feels like we are saying what they did was okay. But the text provides the release valve and the final, most crucial step of the script.
The ultimate release. The script ends with, "I trust you to handle justice." And it references Matthew 6.14-15.
This is the linchpin of the entire psychological process. By stating, "I trust you to handle justice," you're officially resigning from the position of universal judge.
You are handing the gavel over to a higher perfect authority.
Exactly. You aren't saying justice doesn't matter. You aren't saying the person shouldn't be held accountable. You are simply saying, this person has a massive debt to pay, but I am no longer the debt collector.
That is breathtakingly liberating.
Yeah.
You completely remove the burden of retaliation right off your own shoulders. It's above your pay grade now.
And once you hand over the demand for justice, the tension in the rowboat vanishes. You aren't trying to punish them anymore.
Yeah.
You have clean hands, you are free from the background app draining your battery, and your heart can actually begin the physical process of healing.
It is the ultimate application of praying through. You didn't pray the betrayal away, it still happened. But you prayed through the resulting trauma until it produced freedom instead of bitterness. So, what does this all mean? If we zoom out and look at the entire landscape we've traversed today, we started with the most basic, instinctual human reflex.
The demand for a pain-free life.
Yes. The constant panic desire to just pray away the friction, to get helicoptered to the summit, to instantly fix the terrifying health crisis, to magically refill the empty bank account, to force the difficult person to agree with us, and to remove the heavy burdens of leadership.
We started with a posture of demanding that the external world conform entirely to our comfort. A posture driven by fear and avoidance.
Right. But step by step, by examining these specific scripts, the text has offered us a completely different architectural blueprint for living. It has shown us that by shifting one single concept, moving from away to through, we transition from a posture of fear to a posture of active, courageous participation in our own development.
It's beautiful.
We learn to let the terrifying illness produce perseverance. We learn to prioritize our internal maturity over our immediate external provision. We learn to sit in the vibrating tension of broken relationships and respond with grounded wisdom rather than frantic control.
We learn to sustain the crushing weights of leadership rather than abandoning them to preserve our ego.
And ultimately, we learn to release the profound neurological poison of betrayal by handing the demand for justice over to a higher authority. It is a comprehensive roadmap for deep, enduring spiritual freedom.
It truly is. And if we connect all of this back to the very beginning, to the specific listener who brought this text to us, looking for a way to navigate their own muddy, protracted trials, This framework does not promise to clear the muddy waters.
It doesn't.
It does not promise that the water will instantly become crystal clear and easy to wade through. It assumes the water stays muddy and the current stays incredibly strong.
The fire is still burning, but you are becoming fireproof.
Exactly. What this framework does is transform you into a stronger swimmer. It ensures that while you are navigating those terrifying waters, you are actively acquiring the strength, the wisdom, the character, and the presence required to not just survive the crossing, but to emerge with a profound, unshakable sense of purpose. Which actually leaves me with a final, somewhat provocative thought to consider, building on the text's themes of transformation.
Oh, I love a good provocative thought to close on. What is it?
Well, we spend so much of our finite human energy desperately trying to escape our trials, right? We exhaust ourselves constantly looking for the exit door. But if you truly commit to this framework, if you commit to the daily, grueling work of praying through rather than praying away, you are inviting a process of deep, fundamental, cellular alteration of your own character.
Okay, I'm with you.
So the question is this. Is it possible that by the time you actually reach the other side of this protracted trial, by the time you finally step out of the muddy waters, you will have fundamentally changed so much that the original problem you were so desperate to escape wouldn't even recognize you anymore?
Wow.
You won't just be someone who barely survived a fire, you will be someone who was entirely forged by it.
The problem wouldn't even recognize you anymore because you are operating on a completely different caliber of human existence.
Exactly.
That is a paradigm-shifting thought that is going to linger with me for a long, long time. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thank you for trusting us with these notes and for joining us on this journey.
It's been an absolute privilege.
It really is incredibly heavy material, but as the source text makes abundantly clear, it is exactly this kind of heavy lifting that builds the most enduring, unshakable strength. We want to leave you with the sign-off from the source material itself, which serves as both a comfort and a challenge for whatever specific tension you are navigating right now. Keep praying through whatever you're facing today.
When the storm is raging and the night feels long, when the burden's heavy and I can't go on, I will not demand you take it all away, but I'll lift my hands and choose to pray. Lord, pray me through the waters, pray me through the fire. Let your grace be sufficient, let your strength lift me higher. Not away but through it, I will walk with you in the middle of the trial. Pray me.